Close your eyes for a moment and picture Canada in the 1950s. The streets are dusted with early snow, streetcars hum along their tracks, and the clink of glass milk bottles signals the start of a new day. Life moved at a slower pace, guided by simple routines and small rituals that shaped communities, traditions that today feel almost magical, yet quietly disappeared over the decades. Back then, everyday life had its own charm. Children circled toys in thick holiday catalogs like the Simpson Sears Wish Book. Families bundled up to marvel at Eaton's downtown Christmas windows, and teenagers spent summer nights under the stars at drive-in theaters. Phones were shared on party lines, rooftops bristled with TV aerials, and the Iceman delivered blocks of ice to keep food cold. These were not just conveniences. They were rituals, moments that connected neighbors, shaped childhoods, and marked the rhythm of daily life. But as the years rolled on, progress and technology quietly replaced them. Suburban malls, refrigerators, cars, and private phone lines slowly took over, leaving behind memories preserved only in old photographs, heirlooms, and stories passed down through generations. In this video, we'll explore 10 forgotten things from 1950s Canada, from the glamour of Trans-Canada Airlines to the quirky charm of the devil's face on 1954 banknotes. Each memory is a window into a world that existed decades ago, a world full of wonder, connection, and nostalgia. So tell us, which of these first 10 forgotten traditions sparks the most nostalgia for you? Did you ever experience the milkman's early morning rounds or ride a Montreal streetcar? And if you could bring back one thing from the 1950s, what would it be? Drop your memories in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. Imagine this. It's a frosty November evening in 1955, and outside, the streets of Canada are wrapped in early winter silence. Inside a warm family living room, a different kind of excitement is beginning. Mom places a thick, glossy catalog on the coffee table, a book so heavy it thuds like a brick. The kids don't even wait. They dive toward it, elbows first. This wasn't just any book. This was the Simpson Sears Wish Book, the dream machine of the 1950s. For millions of Canadian families, the Wish Book was more than a catalog. It was a seasonal ritual, a countdown to Christmas before Advent calendars even became popular. Every year, when that catalog arrived in the mail, it felt like the holiday season officially began. Kids flipped straight to the toy section, eyes sparkling like Christmas lights. The iconic train sets, dollhouses, chemistry kits, cowboy costumes, everything a child could imagine lived inside those pages. Parents had their own routine. They'd scan the pages slowly, quietly planning Christmas budgets, circling items with a soft pencil so the kids wouldn't notice. The Wish Book made gift-giving feel organized, magical, and even a little adventurous. Families in remote towns, especially in northern Canada, relied on it heavily. One mail order could travel hundreds of kilometers to a house that had never seen a department store. And then there were the letters to Santa. Kids didn't just write a doll or a toy truck. No, this was the 1950s. They wrote the full catalog number, page number, and description to avoid confusion. Even Santa had to stay efficient. But like many beloved traditions, the Wish Book didn't last forever. So what happened? The fall began quietly in the 1960s. Suburbs were booming, cars were everywhere, and for the first time families could drive to big, bright malls that had everything under one roof. Walking through a store, touching the toys, and tasting the food court treats gave a kind of instant gratification a catalog simply couldn't match. Then came the 1970s. Big box chains grew, shelves expanded, and television commercials started doing the job that catalogs once did. Kids no longer waited for the mail. They begged for whatever they saw on Saturday morning cartoons, loud, colorful, animated toy ads that made everything look like the greatest invention ever made. But the biggest blow came later, the internet. When online shopping arrived, the Wish Book became painfully slow by comparison. Why flip through hundreds of pages when you could scroll an entire store in seconds? By the time Sears' digital competitors took over, Amazon especially, the magic of the Wish Book faded like an old Christmas ornament buried in the attic. Today, if you ask older Canadians about the Wish Book, their eyes soften, because it wasn't just paper, it wasn't just shopping. It was a moment in time, a shared memory of family, childhood excitement, and the feeling of waiting for something wonderful. It's a freezing December evening somewhere in the late 1950s. Snowflakes drift softly under streetlights, melting the second they touch your scarf. Families are bundled in thick coats, children wrapped like little snowmen, hands tucked into wool mittens. But they're not here to shop. No one is rushing to buy anything. They're here for one reason: Eaton's downtown Christmas windows. For decades, these weren't just decorations. They were events, the unofficial grand opening of the Canadian holiday season. When Eaton's unveiled its Christmas windows, it felt like the whole city exhaled at once, finally ready for the magic of December. Kids would press their faces against the cold glass, eyes wide, breath fogging the windows, and inside those glowing displays, a world that felt alive. Mechanical elves hammered tiny toys with perfect rhythm. Wooden reindeer bobbed their heads as if breathing. Trains chugged through miniature snowy villages, puffing little clouds of steam that seemed real to every child watching. Then there was Santa's workshop, brightly lit, warm, golden. Puppets and figurines moved with clockwork precision, creating a scene that felt straight out of the North Pole. Every year the themes changed, and every year families returned, excited to see what Eaton's had dreamed up next. For parents, these evenings were magical too, but for different reasons. After a long year of work and stress, walking hand in hand with their children, watching their faces glow in the reflection of the display, it was a moment of quiet joy, a reminder of how simple happiness used to be. Some families made it a tradition: dinner downtown, hot chocolate afterward, and at least one slow, lingering walk past the windows. Kids begged to return just one more time, as if afraid the magic would disappear if they didn't soak in every second. But like many beautiful traditions of the past, the story took a turn. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, something big was happening. The suburbs were exploding. Shopping plazas and indoor malls were popping up everywhere, warmer, cleaner, easier to park at. Families who once traveled downtown for the holiday rush now preferred the convenience of suburban shopping centers. And with fewer people heading downtown, the crowds around Eaton's windows began to thin. Budgets at the big department stores tightened. What once had finance, engineering teams, artists, carpenters, and electricians now had to compete with cheaper advertising options. Flashy TV commercials replaced handcrafted holiday magic. By the time the 1990s arrived, the glory days were fading fast. The animated windows, once the heartbeat of Canadian Christmas nostalgia, slowly became just another memory, captured in old photo albums and grandparents' warm stories. Ask anyone who grew up in that era, though, and you'll see their face soften instantly. Because Eaton's Christmas windows weren't just decorations, they were a childhood experience, a seasonal ritual, a piece of Canadian winter that felt alive. They were a moment in time, a moment that no modern LED display or online ad could ever replace. If you're enjoying this nostalgic trip through 1950s Canada, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us keep these memories alive. And if you love diving into Canada's forgotten traditions, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story from the past. Share your memories in the comments below. Your stories might even inspire the next video. Summer nights in the 1950s had a rhythm all their own in Canada, a beat defined not by clocks but by the hum of car engines, the smell of popcorn, and the thrill of cinema under the open sky. As dusk settled and the sun dipped below the horizon, families and teenagers packed into their cars, windows down, hands clutching ticket stubs and paper bags filled with snacks. The destination, the drive-in theater, one of the most iconic symbols of post-war North American culture. Gravel lots stretched for acres, dotted with rows of metal posts, each holding a speaker that would hang on a car window, delivering crisp, tinny sound directly to the passengers inside. There was a charm to the ritual, the small clink of the speaker's hook, the anticipation of the reel spinning to life, and the quiet excitement as the first frames flickered on the giant screen. For teenagers, the drive-in was more than entertainment. The back rows became secret lounges, a private world tucked behind parked cars, where whispered conversations, shy kisses, and stolen glances felt timeless. Families experienced something entirely different, a night out that combined the magic of Hollywood with the intimacy of a car packed with loved ones. Popcorn bags crinkled, sodas fizzed, and the scent of French fries wafted across the lot. The drive-in was a shared cultural heartbeat, a summer ritual Canadians eagerly anticipated. But the very magic that made them iconic couldn't withstand the pressures of change. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, urban growth began to encroach. Land values skyrocketed, making it more profitable to build condos, shopping plazas, or office spaces than to maintain a seasonal outdoor theater. Multiplex cinemas sprouted in cities, offering year-round comfort, climate-controlled interiors, and multiple screens showing the latest releases simultaneously. The short Canadian summer, beautiful as it was, simply wasn't long enough to sustain the business model of the drive-in. Even worse, noise bylaws started tightening, limiting the freedom these outdoor spaces once had enjoyed. Gradually, one by one, the towering screens began to disappear. Gravel lots were paved over, speakers dismantled, and neon signs flickered out for the last time. What remained were memories, the feel of a car packed with friends and family in a moment that felt bigger than the screen itself. For those who grew up with them, drive-ins weren't just places to watch movies. They were a canvas for summer stories, a cultural experience that mixed cinema, community, and freedom in a way indoor theaters could never replicate. Kids became teens, teens became adults, and those gravel lots became empty plots waiting for development. Yet the nostalgia lingers, echoing in old photographs, faded ticket stubs, and the stories grandparents share when recounting summers gone by. The drive-in theater might have vanished from the landscape, replaced by condos, plazas, and parking lots, but in the hearts of those who experienced it, it remains eternal. A symbol of summer magic, community, and a uniquely Canadian way of enjoying the movies. Before the hum of refrigerators could store a week's worth of groceries, the milkman was a fixture of Canadian mornings. As dawn broke, frosty glass bottles with shiny foil caps would appear on front steps, balanced neatly in wire caddies. Children would rush to see the thick cream line floating at the top, a simple delight that made breakfast feel special. Some families didn't even use cash. Small metal tokens were exchanged, a quaint ritual that tied neighbors together in quiet trust. The milkman's whistle, or the clinking of glass bottles, became the unofficial soundtrack of early mornings. Across town, across the country, daily deliveries brought freshness straight to doorsteps, an era when life moved at the rhythm of footsteps, wheels, and the soft murmur of community. But the world changed fast. As families bought cars and supermarkets expanded, the economics of daily milk delivery became impossible to sustain. Refrigerators grew larger, enabling people to store milk for days. Wax cartons and later plastic jugs replaced the elegant glass bottles, cheap and convenient, but without the ritualistic charm. The milkman's early morning rounds disappeared quietly, leaving only the memory of a simpler, slower-paced life, of children peeking at cream lines, neighbors chatting over tokens, and mornings that smelled faintly of dairy and snow. The milkman didn't vanish just from the streets, he vanished from the imagination of daily life. Today, when older Canadians remember him, it's with warmth, nostalgia, and a reminder that even small routines can define the character of a community. Imagine lifting a phone off the wall, expecting a private conversation, only to hear your neighbor chatting mid-gossip. That was the reality of party line telephones in Canada. These shared telephone circuits were cost-effective, especially in rural and suburban areas, but they came at a price: privacy. Every household had a unique ring pattern, 2 short, 1 long, for example, signaling that a call was for your family. But patience was a virtue. If someone else was talking, you had to wait. Listening to neighbors' conversations became part of life, sometimes amusing, often frustrating. Yet for decades it was how families stayed connected, shared news, and maintained ties in communities where telephones were still a luxury. Through the 1960s, telephone infrastructure modernized. Private lines became more affordable and increasingly standard. Gradually, the quirks of party lines, the eavesdropping, the waiting, the occasional accidental interruptions, faded into memory. Families no longer needed to schedule calls or decode ring patterns. The luxury of picking up the phone and speaking freely, without an audience, became the new normal. Today, party lines are a relic of a bygone era, a reminder of a time when communication was communal, slow, and full of unexpected connections, a sharp contrast to the instant private calls we take for granted. Imagine walking down a Montreal street in the 1950s. The sidewalks are busy with commuters, shopkeepers, and children on their way to school. But the true rhythm of the city comes not from footsteps, but from a steady hum and clang, the sound of electric streetcars gliding past. Painted cream and green, these trams linked neighborhoods together, carrying passengers through winter's slush and summer's heat waves. The streetcar bell became the city's heartbeat. People timed their mornings by it, memorized routes by experience, and relied on it for work, school, and errands. There was a quiet poetry in watching the cars sweep through downtown streets, their movements choreographed like clockwork. Commuters nodded to conductors, kids waved at familiar faces on other trams, and the city pulsed with life in a way that only public transit could orchestrate. But all rhythms change. By 1959, the final Montreal streetcar completed its last run. Post-war urban planners envisioned a modern, car-first city. Buses were cheaper, flexible, and easier to reroute. Maintaining tracks through the ever-changing streets became cumbersome. Slowly, streetcar tracks were ripped up, replaced by asphalt lanes and rubber tires. Montrealers mourned quietly, aware they were losing more than transport. They were losing a piece of their city's character, a soundscape, a daily ritual. Yet progress rolled forward, reshaping the urban heartbeat. The trams are gone, but their echo lingers, a reminder of a Montreal where the city's pulse was metal on rail, steady and familiar. Long before Air Canada became a household name, Canadians looked to Trans-Canada Airlines as a symbol of ambition and connectivity. The country was vast, distances intimidating, and air travel was still a daring adventure. Boarding a TCA flight in the 1950s wasn't just a commute, it was an event. Gleaming Viscount propeller planes sparkled under hangar lights. Flight attendants wore crisp, polished uniforms. Every takeoff felt glamorous, every landing precise. Flying with TCA was more than convenience. It was a statement. It represented a young nation learning to conquer its enormous landscapes, connecting cities from coast to coast in hours that once took days by train. Canadians looked to TCA with pride. It wasn't just a company, it was a lifeline across the vastness of the country. But the jet age arrived quickly. Sleek aircraft promised speed, comfort, and international travel. Canada's national carrier needed to match the changing times. In 1965, TCA rebranded as Air Canada, trading propellers for jets, a familiar name for a modern world. The look changed, the planes advanced, but the mission remained, to unite a country, one flight at a time. Even though TCA no longer exists, its legacy endures. It reminds Canadians of a time when flying was a luxury, an adventure, and a symbol of progress, a golden era of air travel that helped stitch a young nation together. Step aboard the Canadian in 1955, and you weren't just traveling, you were entering a moving showcase of Canada itself. Launched by Canadian Pacific, this train redefined luxury on rails. Stainless steel railcars gleamed in the sun, domed observation decks invited passengers to soak in panoramic views, and lounges offered cocktails as the country unfolded outside the windows. From Toronto to Vancouver, every mile felt like a living postcard. Passengers sipped drinks while forests rolled past, mountains towered in the distance, and endless prairies stretched under wide-open skies. The train wasn't merely about transport, it was an experience, a celebration of the nation's beauty, ingenuity, and connectivity. Families, business travelers, and tourists alike marveled at the elegance and attention to detail, the plush seats, gleaming tables, and the almost theatrical presentation of the landscape outside. But the golden age of the Canadian couldn't last forever. Economic pressures, route adjustments, and changing travel habits gradually chipped away at its luxury. Cars became more common, airlines grew, and the romance of a multi-day cross-country journey lost its practicality. Over time, some observation decks were altered, and services scaled back to meet the realities of modern travel. Today, the Canadian still runs, carrying passengers across Canada's vast landscapes. But the opulence, the cocktails with a panoramic view, and the feeling that you were gliding through a moving art gallery, that first-decade magic is gone. It remains, however, in photographs, stories, and the memory of a time when the train itself was as much a destination as the cities it connected. Walk down any street in 1950s Canada, and you couldn't miss it. The Canadian red ensign waved proudly outside schools, government buildings, and even private homes. A striking red flag featuring the Union Jack and the Canadian coat of arms, it symbolized the country's British heritage and wartime legacy, a reminder of the ties that shaped the young nation. For Canadians of the era, the red ensign wasn't just fabric. It was identity, tradition, and history woven together. Kids grew up saluting it in schools, while parades and ceremonies reminded citizens of the unity it represented. It was deeply familiar, a comforting presence in a country still defining its own path. But change was on the horizon. As the 1960s progressed, many Canadians yearned for a symbol that felt uniquely their own. This led to the Great Flag debate, a national discussion that stirred strong emotions on both sides. Traditionalists mourned the loss of history, while progressives envisioned a modern, bold emblem for a nation stepping confidently into the future. In 1965, the maple leaf flag was adopted. The red ensign quietly disappeared from flagpoles across the country, leaving only memories and heritage collections. Today, the ensign survives in museums, photographs, and stories, a reminder of Canada's journey from tradition to national self-expression. Picture a crisp 1954 Canadian banknote in your hand. Tilt it just right, and a curious illusion appears, a tiny, grinning devil's face hidden in the Queen's hair. For those who noticed, it sparked whispers, fascination, and even a little mischief. Suddenly, ordinary banknotes became treasure troves for collectors and curious citizens alike. The devil's face notes were not designed to scare anyone, but the optical illusion was unmistakable. Canadians talked in hushed tones about the secret figure, trading observations and comparing discoveries. Soon, collectors began hoarding the bills, creating a quiet craze that spread across the country. The Bank of Canada, however, was less amused. The illusion, while accidental, was a problem for official currency. They redesigned the portrait, softening shadows and removing any hint of the hidden figure. Early prints were systematically pulled from circulation, leaving only a handful of devil-faced notes in the hands of collectors. Today, the 1954 devil's face is a quirky footnote in Canadian currency history, a playful reminder that even the most official, mundane objects can carry hidden surprises. It's an enduring symbol of curiosity, accidental artistry, and the stories that everyday items can tell about a nation's past.